Hello and welcome to the WIHS Journal Public Affairs program. I'm Jerry Williams. Join me now for part 3 of author Eric Metaxas speaking at the Family Institute of Connecticut's annual gala that took place at the AquaTurf in Plantsville, Connecticut. That's happening now on the WIHS Journal. It's news and public affairs.
So Bonhoeffer could see what was going on in the church, that the Nazis had fooled. Now, again, it's the same thing that's happening today. You have different reasons that people are being fooled or whatever it is. So of the 18,000 pastors, you had about 3,000 that were standing very, very firm, heroes, being willing to be sent to a concentration camp, willing to lose whatever. On the other end of the spectrum, you had about 3,000 utterly pro-Nazi, 100% pro-Nazi. But here's the point. In the middle, you have about 12,000 who said, in effect, we're not going to choose. We're going to stay neutral. We're going to sit on the fence. We just want to preach the gospel. We just want to preach the gospel. We just want to do church. In other words, we're not going to be political. I guess they never read the book of Esther. They gave religious excuses for doing nothing in the face of satanic evil. And there's nothing more wicked, as I said, than giving a religious excuse for looking the other way as evil rises. And they said, no, we're going to sit on the fence. We just want to preach the gospel. We just care about evangelism. There's a chapter in a letter to the American Church called The Idol of Evangelism. What happens when you take a great thing and you make it an idol? You say, I'm not going to talk about this or this or this or this because I might drive somebody away from Jesus. I don't know what thin-lipped, useless, evil pseudo-gospel you're preaching in your church if you don't speak about these moral issues. But it happened in America. It happened in America in the 1850s. Do you know how many pastors of the 1850s said, we're not going to take a stand on the slavery issue? That's political. No, we just care about doing church. We just care about singing hymns to Jesus. Jesus is disgusted with your religiosity if you don't stand up against evil for the sake of the men and the women created in his image whom he loves. That's the job of the Church of Jesus Christ. Bonhoeffer knew this was the case, and he tried to get the German churches to see this. But as I said, 12,000. It's almost like I give a pass to the 3,000 pro-Nazi Hitler lovers because they're just crazy. That's like you've all seen videos on YouTube of, some woman pastor, talking about how abortion is a beautiful thing or whatever lunacy, whatever. You almost want to give them a pass because they're just crazy. But what about those pastors who don't think that way? But they are silent in the face of that evil. They say nothing. They say, we just want to preach the gospel. We don't want to be political in our church. That's no different than saying, I will not take a stand on the slavery issue because I care about the gospel. That has been happening. It's always the case. And I tell you, even pastors that I know and love say things like, from the pulpit, we would never endorse a candidate or we would never endorse a party. And I think to myself, why not? What do you fear? You have this thing called the Constitution. You have this thing called freedom of speech, freedom of religion. You can say anything you like. Or you care about losing your 501c3 status, I guess, Mr. Pastor, Mr. Brave Christian leader. That's what you care about. Shame on you. Because it is that kind of worldly thinking that has allowed us to get to a place where Peter has to be fighting for the kind of crazy stuff that he's fighting for in America. It's the job of the church to be fighting these battles. It's the job of the church to be speaking this from pulpits. So Bonhoeffer was trying to get the pastors in the middle, the 12,000 pastors, but they said, no, we just want to do church. Bonhoeffer actually said, those who do not speak out for the Jews should not sing Gregorian chants, should not sing worship to God. You speak up for the Jews. That's what God is calling you to do. And God is calling pastors today to do the same thing for the unborn. Think if the church were to speak out boldly, think how many families that don't go to church because they already know that most churches are useless. Most churches are not speaking to them where they live. It's all this piety and this religious stuff. What about the fact that my kid goes to school and is being propagandized into questioning his sexual identity? What about that? What about the my daughter goes to school and they have pornographic books in the library? What about the fact that my kids are in a public school where they're pushing socialist, Marxist lunacy down their throats? The church should be speaking about that. The church should be actively speaking about that. And all of those parents who don't go to church suddenly would be interested in going to that church. And think of the irony, because a lot of pastors that don't talk about this stuff is because they're afraid that they're going to drive people away. Well, they are driving people away. And I really believe that the churches that refuse to speak on these things, it's no different than the fig tree that Jesus cursed. Jesus cursed the fig tree. Gentle Jesus, meek and mild, cursed the fig tree. You have been unfruitful. You are cursed. That is what God is saying to the churches today that are not being fruitful. You are cursed. You're worried about losing people. You will lose everyone. Your doors will be shut. And doors are being shut. You know, I speak around the country, and so I have a knowledge. The churches that invite me to speak, almost all of them are booming because they have been bold on every one of the issues that the Family Institute of Connecticut is talking about. They've been bold from their pulpits. And if you're bold from your pulpit, people are interested in that kind of church. There are tons of people that when COVID happened and all the churches shut, they thought, oh, is there any churches that are open? I'll go to that church. They go to that church and suddenly they hear boldness. They hear courage. They go, you know what? I didn't know you could get this in church. I'm going to that church. Those churches have exploded. They're building new parking lots. I hear this all over the country. And the churches that are trying to cling to the few people, the few big tithers they have, are dying on the vine. This is God's design. This is God's judgment against churches that are not bearing the fruit that he commands us to bear. And that's where we are in America today. So the German church is an example to us, a nightmare example of what happens when enough people keep silent. Honestly, those 12,000 pastors said, we're not going to choose. We're just going to do church. We're not going to be political. We're just going to do church. We're just going to sit on the fence. We're going to be neutral. Well, they didn't know the devil owns the fence. The devil owns the fence. If you do not choose, you have chosen. Silence in the face of evil is itself evil. God is a judge. You cannot fool him with your silence. So when you think about what is the state's idea of a church, what is the kind of church they let you go to in China, right? In China, there's the underground church. They're risking their lives and torture. But then they have the official state church. The official state church, the state says, oh, you can go into that building on Sunday morning and do your little weird religious rituals. It has no bearing on us. We don't care. But when you come out, you will bow to the secular authority of the state. If you accept that, you've made a deal with the devil. The people who go to those kinds of churches that have made that deal, it's not the church of Jesus Christ. I don't know what it is. It's a counterfeit church. There's an example, the sequel to Letter to the American Church, and it's in my Bonhoeffer book as well, but the story I tell, it's like a made-up thing, except it's a true story. Niemöller, Pastor Martin Niemöller, some of you know the famous story. He wrote the poem, first they came for the socialists, but I didn't speak up because I was not a socialist. Then they came for this group, and I didn't speak up for that group because I was not part of that group. Then they came for the Jews. I didn't speak up because I was not a Jew. And then when they came for me, there was no one left to speak up for me. That's cancel culture in our time, right? They come for that group, and you go, well, I don't care about that group. And they come for this group, and I don't care about that group. Martin Niemöller was a patriotic German, and he was fooled by Hitler into thinking, listen, maybe Hitler's not perfect, but he's not going to come after the churches. He had a private meeting with Hitler. I write about this in the book. He had a private meeting with Hitler. He was a prominent pastor, and Hitler gave him his personal assurance, I won't come after the church. I won't have pogroms for the Jews. And Niemöller hears this, and he says, okay, mein Führer, you said it, I believe it. So Hitler comes into power and immediately starts taking the kinds of actions he said he wouldn't. Niemöller really believed, it's the people around Hitler. If I can just have a meeting with Hitler, I'm sure I can convince Hitler, he just isn't aware of what's happening. Well, it takes over a year for him to get a meeting with Hitler. So it's early 1934. Martin Niemöller has a meeting with Hitler. And the conversation begins, I believe it was Goering reading a transcript of Martin Niemöller's tapped phone conversation. So just to kind of let you know, right, you walk into a room and they're like, okay, Pastor, and they read his phone conversation that they had recorded where he had cracked some joke about Hitler or something benign. He starts, standing up for himself. He says, well, mein Führer, you don't understand. I'm a very patriotic German, which he was. He won the Iron Cross in World War I. He says, I'm very patriotic German. I care about the Third Reich. I care about Germany. I care about the Third Reich. And Hitler says, and this is just to me the classic line, he says to him, I built the Third Reich. You just worry about your sermons. So he might as well have said, you just worry about your useless little religious sermons.
And again, that was author Eric Metaxas speaking at the Family Institute of Connecticut's annual gala that took place at the AquaTurf in Plantsville, Connecticut. Join me tomorrow at this same time for the final segment. If you would like more information about what you heard today, call WIHS 860-346-1049, 860-346-1049. The opinions expressed are those of the participants, not necessarily of those of the staff or management of the station. I'm Jerry Williams for the WIHS Journal. It's news and public affairs.